to guide them through a difficult process. I need to meet them where they are. And that's not just giving them the vocabulary, the terminology, or even the timeline. That's being emotionally available and able to engage with them where they're at, even if that means just being patient, even if that means, hey, I can tell and see that you're flooded right now, and that's not a place where you're going to make an informed decision.
My name is Kevin McIntosh, and this is The Closing Table, where we talk to experts about their experience in real estate all across the country. Let's go. Welcome to The Closing Table. Pull up a seat. My name is Kevin McIntosh. Joining us on this episode, we will be speaking with top producing agent Chris Silker. How you doing, Chris?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, super dope name. It just rolls off the tongue, like the name. And starting off, let me say happy birthday to you, Chris.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. See, I had to throw that out there too. I know your birthday is right here. So Happy birthday, man. So before we start digging into your professional career and things of that nature, I got a game for you, Chris. It's called Word Association. This is our icebreaker. I'm going to throw out a word and or phrase that's real estate related. All you have to do is just yell out the first thing that comes to mind, whether it be a word, a phrase, sentence, or whatever. You can explain why you came up with it if you want, but we're just going to shoot through these 5 real quick. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, first word, capital gains.
Opportunity.
Property tax. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something?
Capital gains is opportunity because it can be avoided. There are a lot of ways to structure your tax liabilities to make sure that you're avoiding capital gains, and an informed consumer can make informed decisions, making sure that they can either minimize or avoid those gains taxes altogether.
I'm so glad you didn't run past that. Thanks for explaining that. Appreciate it. All right, cool. Property tax.
Unnecessary evil.
Okay.
Paying taxes is a great problem to have in this country, and I believe that paying taxes is our fair share and due, and we should also minimize that to our greatest legal extent possible. Property taxes means that you are paying for ownership, and there is no greater path to wealth generation, generational wealth, than through property investment and ownership. So it's a necessary evil. Nobody loves it,
Well
and
said.
you got to have it.
Well said. Okay. Home warranty.
Ooh, tough one. Home warranty. I'll have to say, meh is a good word. In my experience, home warranties do a great job of protecting a seller. I think that they have a phenomenal product. They provide another layer of insulation against legal pursuit after a sale. And yet they're marketed and pitched as a asset to a buyer.
Right.
In most cases, that doesn't quite pan out. They usually end up paying for themselves in one way or another. In terms of an investment, meh. In terms of peace of mind, if you're the person that buys the extended warranty and the rental car insurance, you should absolutely have a home warranty. And the good news is most sellers will buy you one if you want it.
There it is. Okay. Purchase agreement.
Necessary. A well-written purchase agreement is an absolute crucial tool to having a smooth and well-run real estate transaction. One of the greatest assets to being a member of the Greater Lansing Association of Realtors are our forms. Most agents are not as informed or practiced in seeing what other areas, what other practices there are for those forms. We have a really, really well-written purchase agreement. It's not perfect. It's one of the best ones out there, and it provides a great protection to both parties, buyer and seller, which is a huge asset to doing business in the Greater Lansing area.
Nice. Last but not least, Homeowner Association, aka HOA.
Not as bad as most people think. So what most buyers don't understand, and even what a lot of homeowners don't understand, is there are different types of HOAs. There are different types of legal entities. Most HOAs actually operate as neighborhood associations, which are not enforcement agencies. An
Right.
HOA is an enforcement agency, meaning they can place a lien on your home if you don't participate or if you're in violation
Mm-hmm.
of their rules. The vast majority of them don't operate that way. They're actually neighborhood associations. Then there's also a condo association, which is also a very different type of entity than a homeowners association, because there are shared properties, and particularly with how you use and enjoy your building, whether it's attached or detached, varies greatly. So again, a great agent should be able to inform you of those opportunities and of those things that you need to be aware of. But I wouldn't get too caught up on it. This is still America, and you're still allowed to enjoy your home. And most of those protections are there to ensure that home's value, i.e. your growth, is
Correct.
maintained.
Correct. Correct. Man, well said, man. You must have talked to your PR team before you got here, man. You killing them right now. All right, Chris, let's get into it, man. First and foremost, you got a degree from Central Michigan University, and
Fire
it
up
is
chips.
focused in fire up chips, and it is focused on elementary education or education in general.
Yeah.
Now, when I saw that, I immediately thought that has got to be helpful in this field, because I feel like you can translate complex information into something that's more consumable for the average client. Can you explain like how that actually gives you an advantage in your career?
It gives me a huge advantage, but be careful here. You might be saying people are only engaging at an elementary level. Uh, people are people, and it doesn't matter how old they are.
There you go. There you go.
And I think communication is key. I think emotional intelligence is maybe even a bigger piece of that,
Mm,
because we all know the vast majority of our transactions are going to be for owner occupied, and the place we live, the place where we sleep, spend our time is deeply personal. And that
right.
comes with a lot of really big feelings, both when we're searching, when we're buying, when we're negotiating, when we're going through the gamut of the market right now, where things are moving really, really fast, where we have to make really big, important decisions under some duress and pressure. I think being able to key on that emotional intelligence, that experience of working with people who are younger and maybe not as practiced at handling those emotions, gives me a lot of real life practice, because when we are under pressure, when people are stressed, they revert to that state. And that's very human. That's not a dig at anyone. That's not saying anyone's immature. That's just recognizing the human experience of when we're stressed, we revert to our deepest level of experience.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
almost always childhood. Um,
Mm,
I grew up in a really interesting background where both of my parents were, my dad was a counselor, psychologist, my mom was a social worker. And that was a big
okay.
reason why I chose education. But those experiences, that background gives me that emotional intelligence to relate to people, to understand where they're at, to understand that in order to guide them through a difficult process, I need to meet them where they are. And that's
Right.
not
Right.
just giving them the vocabulary, the terminology, or even the timeline. That's being emotionally available and able to engage with them where they're at, even if that means
Right.
just being patient, even if that means, hey,
Yep.
I can tell and see that you're flooded right now, and that's not a place where you're going to make an informed decision. One of my favorite sayings is, a brain on purpose is so much more powerful than a brain on panic. So let's get out of panic and
Mm.
get into purposeful. And if that takes time, if that takes information, or if that takes an outside influence, let's seek those opportunities and get back to on purpose.
Chris starting early with the gems, man. He is dropping jewels. Okay, okay. I see where this is going. Great response right there. I appreciate that. Okay, Chris. So I like that you spoke on emotional intelligence. This was something I probably read a book on maybe 10 years ago. And I don't think it was popular at all. Nobody was really saying emotional intelligence, EI, and things of that nature. It's essentially just reading the room. And you would think that's something that should be common or easy, but it's really not. I mean, a lot of people already say common sense isn't common, but I like the way that you put that. Essentially, it's just, kind of gauging your clients, seeing where they are, and meeting them where they are, man. So well said, man. Thank you. I couldn't say that enough, man. I couldn't
I
have said it
appreciate
better.
that.
Right. So in your local market, Before we even get into that, why don't you explain people where your current market is that you're serving geographically, and then give any other details regarding your market?
Sure. So my office is located in Okemos. I spent the vast majority of my time in Greater Lansing and Holt. I do serve the entire Greater Lansing region, so that's going to be Portland to Weberville, St. John's to Leslie Jackson. I also grew up in Mount Pleasant, so I do serve that area quite a bit. I do am happy to go back up there and help with anyone who needs my service in that area. It's not far to drive. It's
Right.
a market that I know and understand really well. So I do cover those areas. I do have great referral partners in the metro area to Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids and Northern
Yeah.
Michigan that are all agents that I communicate with regularly that I know, trust, and will care for the people that I send their way the same way that I work with people here in the Lansing area.
And I can tell, man, because with that being said, the work that you put in your market, you were recognized as Okemos 2023 Local Business Person of the Year
Yeah.
on Small Business Network alignment. So congratulations for that, first and foremost. And can you speak on the work that it took to be recognized as the Local Business Person of the Year?
I would love to say that it was this massive Herculean effort, and it really wasn't. Mostly it was the fact that I do work really hard at staying engaged with my sphere, my people who matter, and which is anybody that I've interacted with. If you've come across me in the last 10 years that I've been in business, I try really hard to be intentional about maintaining a high level relationship. And I think that that's reflected when these opportunities come up, because mostly Alignable is a connection of small business owners and networks in the Meridian Township and Greater Lansing areas. And I just happen to be fortunate to have a lot of those relationships. So when Alignable kind of unleashed in our market, I kind of jumped on that train and just tried to maintain those connections, and that's in that arena to make sure that those people could find me in that way and knew that I was looking out for them. The biggest piece was that I just gave out a lot of awesome referrals to people that I know do a great job of taking care of great people. And those referrals came back, and that was what resulted in that recognition. So I'm very honored, but it was not a huge effort. Mostly it was just trying to give some shout outs and some props to people who I know do a great job.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. I mean, well, you see what happens as a result of that, man. You get rewarded and recognized for those efforts, man. So like I said, congratulations again. Well deserved, just based off this conversation and what I know about you, Chris. You said your goal is to provide the highest level of customer service, which, you would think that's something that should be common, and common sense, once again, isn't common. But let's start here. What is customer service? Define that in your perspective.
So you're absolutely right. Customer service is now an expectation. It's no longer a differential, right? I mean, everybody can provide good customer service. It's no longer a separating factor. The lens that I guide my team through is not just a transaction, it's a relationship, and it's someone we care about, and we want to set them up for success. And that guides all of our decision making, all of our advice, all of our conversations. And the lens that we use to kind of prepare ourselves for those conversations is we want to imagine a year down the road from closing, our clients looking back and knowing that they were taken care of, that they felt good, that they were empowered to make good decisions, and that they know that they were set up for success. That's our guiding force. That's our principal lens of what is really important to us, is that in that 2020 backwards view, right? We can always see clearly when we're looking into the past. Were we taken care of? Were there opportunities missed? And it's just our purpose is to make sure that our clients feel so protected and so cared for that they look back a year from that closing and they are very thankful for the opportunity to have worked with our team.
There you go. There you go. So how do you go about actually making sure that you're staying on top of providing a high level of customer service?
We have a lot of different systems that pertain to that. Probably the most important one that we've spent the majority of our time on, my Director of Operations, Pam Carrier, did a deep dive into what a perfect transaction really looks like, from not just an accepted offer to closing, but really from the first opportunity to build a relationship. So a lead comes in, we get a name, a phone number, or somebody raises their hand to us and says, we're looking to be interested in real estate at some point in the next lifetime. how do we build a relationship? How are we making sure that we're staying in communication with them? And then how are we also holding the third parties of our transaction accountable? How are we making sure that we know what the lender is supposed to be doing and when? How are we making sure that the title is doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are we double checking the work? Are we asking the right questions? It's not just trust and faith, it's trust, faith, and verify, and inspect what you
Okay.
expect. I would say that's probably our biggest system. We have 176 checkpoints in our perfect transaction. That we go through, that make sure that our clients have that great experience.
Right. Oh man, 176. It's a lot of moving parts, man. But it's such a big deal. It's such a complex process, or it can be. That I completely understand. You want to make sure you're literally crossing your T's and dotting your I's with stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it
I would
makes
say
sense.
most agents, if you look at a transaction the way most average agents do, they look at it from an accepted offer to a closing, and there's probably 30 to 40 checkpoints along the way, various email communications, questions asked, whatever.
Hmm.
We have a bigger time span that we're concerned with. We really want to look at that whole relationship from the first opportunity to meet and greet through client appreciation events years after closing is really what we look through as that lens of that lifetime relationship. Um, Beyond that, it's not just what's our responsibility. We want to be looking at what's the responsibility of everybody involved, and are we really being the fiduciary to guide that transaction? Are we really taking charge of leading this through to ensure that we did everything possible to make sure that our client had that great experience?
Nice. There you go. There you go. Make it easier for them, man. I want to talk more about the specifics of the Lansing, greater Lansing area. So with a median price, sales price, $196,000
Mhm.
for a home in this area. I believe that translates to about $117 per square foot. I believe you mentioned that this makes it a pretty successful season, but can you speak on the factors you think contributed to the success of the season, given that median price of homes?
So, if we're looking at this from an agent viewpoint, there are really two factors that equate to gross commission income, which is how an agent looks at money coming in the door minus business expenses equals net income. Those are our business basics, right? And so there are
Mm-hmm.
two factors in the market that relate to gross commission income. That's going to be units and that's going to be volume. You can't have volume without units. You can't have units without volume. Obviously, there's a sales price attached to every unit. Um, what's good from an agent standpoint is the volume is going to be high because sales prices have increased significantly, particularly over the last 2.5 years. The number of units is going to be way down. So
Right,
that
right,
means
right.
that uh, all of the agents that exist in our market, which we have a very saturated agent market, it means
Yeah,
we're all going to be fighting over the same number of transactions.
yeah.
It also means that there's going to be a lot of noise in the market, a lot of information, a lot of chirping, a lot of um, messages going back and forth about working with who and why and what's happening. The biggest thing I can say to a consumer looking at this is I need guidance. I need unbiased professional opinions so that I can make good decisions. Um, any great agent is going to say, look, I'm not responsible for the home you buy, how much you spend, or how you pay for it. What I am responsible for is your experience and making sure
Okay.
that you have great information because ultimately I work for you and the decisions you make are yours. I will make sure that you have the great information to make those decisions. So if you look at it from a consumer standpoint, what that means is if you're buying a home, you've got very little to choose from. And it's going to take some time, it's going to take some energy, it's going to take some repetition to be successful. And so you need somebody who's
Mm.
helping you manage those expectations and who's helping you write the best offers possible to set you up for success without allowing you to set yourself up to fail by going over or waiving an inspection or removing a critical out from a purchase agreement that might be necessary should life change for you before you close,
Right.
which you're a human being. You don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does. And that's what those protections are there for. And when people let go of those in order to get a home under contract, um, that's hope. And hope is not a plan.
Great point. Great
And
point.
so I think the consumer, if you're looking to sell a home, the news is there is no crash coming. And it's still better to do it sooner rather than later because the sooner you make a decision, the more control you have over the outcome.
Mm.
If you want to know
Yeah.
that you're maximizing your value, that you're getting a transition, because most cases, if you're selling a home, you're buying a home. In most cases right now, that means you're letting go of a lower interest rate for a higher interest rate, but you're maximizing some equity. And there's some opportunity there if you can buy something that's a fixer-upper, or if you're just in a situation that life is forcing you to move, a job relocation, or your family has grown, or your family has gotten smaller, and the home you're in now just doesn't make sense. The good news is the interest rate won't be forever. I want to be clear. In my
True.
opinion, I don't think we're going to be going back to the super low interest rates of the 3s and 4s. That's not going to happen in my lifetime, I don't believe. But that doesn't mean that the interest rate is the end all be all. It's not the enemy. It's just a piece of the tool for leverage that you use to buy a home.
Correct.
What I don't want to see people do is running into a rental market that's as inflated, if not more inflated, than our housing market, and we're losing every opportunity for equity to wait out or try and time the market. It's just not logical. And if you look at the numbers, it's not going to make sense. Looking at the 100-year average, if you're in a home for 5 to 7 years, you're coming out ahead. You just are. There's a 4% annual appreciation for single family homes, that irregardless of the market, you're coming out ahead. And the other piece of it is, even if you catch a down market on the sale, again, you're probably buying another home. The market you sell in and the market you buy in are always the same market. So as long as you're transitioning your equity percentage through, you're creating more growth. And that's what's important.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can't tell, Chris is very knowledgeable. I watched one of his videos, which we will talk about later, and I learned a lot too, man. So with that being said about the current market, how is this potentially going to affect the future market and things that's going on, the things that's anticipated to happen in the spring, the summer, even the fall seasons ahead?
Sure. So spring is now. So let's talk about spring. Our market, like most in the Midwest, is tied seasonally to both the weather and to the school systems. So I think that we traditionally see an increase in market inventory or available homes between May and September, which coincidentally coincides with school season, right? People don't like moving when kids are in school. They don't want to pull them out. They don't want to stress them. And people also enjoy moving when there's not snow on the ground or it's not muddy and wet, and they can make those moves comfortably. So that's when the majority of our sales happen. So we have a seasonal adjustment to our market of about 15, 30, 30, and 15 adjusted quarterly. So the two middle quarters, the second and the third quarter, 60% of our business annually happens in those quarters.
Right. Okay.
And so what I see happening right now is we are going to see some more inventory hit the market. It's going to be inventory that turns quickly, which means we're going to see our days on market shrink. We're currently averaging about 40. By the time we hit July, that's going to be around 10, give or take a day or two. That also means we're going to have more competition for those available listings. So we're going to see average negotiation increase. We're currently at 100%. We bottomed out at 97.7 in December. That's going to increase. We topped out at 104% the last 2 years in June, July. We did that in both 20 and 21. I suspect we're going to do the same thing here in 2023. I see no reason that that's going to be different.
Nice. So yeah, I mean, overall, from what I got from my understanding, and this is the same thing you've been explaining, ultimately, it's never necessarily a bad time to buy or to sell. It just pretty much depends on your perspective. I mean, you can always find a good deal. It is kind of a seller's market now, obviously. But that kind of brings me to my next question. So let's get into it. How do you explain the discrepancy between the drop in median sold list prices and the increase in median active list prices in this market?
The inventory that's available. So what you see is higher priced inventory being available for a longer period of time. We just had an influx of 500 plus homes. That made up about 20% of our available inventory from January through March. And we also have a much smaller buyer pool for that price point of homes. So they sat on the market longer. That's why we have a discrepancy.
Okay. All right.
If you look if you were to isolate the median range, say 15% above and 15% below that 196 median price point, you would see that the days on market is much shorter, and you would also see a much tighter grouping because those properties are moving very, very quickly.
Okay. So in regards to first-time home buyers, How do you help them navigate these current markets also, particularly in regards to the low absorption rate and the decrease in inventory?
So the biggest objection we get from her first-time home buyers right now is interest rate. First and foremost is how can I possibly do this, and what's my buying power going to be? So the first thing we do is we run the numbers on estimates based on the interest rates, and then we also talk mortgage hacks. We've got to look at getting educated. There are a ton of different tools available in the mortgage industry, and so I'm not a financial advisor, so this is as is advice, but you can look at 5-to-1 ARMs, 2-for-1 buy downs. You can also look at principal repayment plans where you're accelerating your principal payment annually or quarterly or monthly or biweekly that all equal significant savings. So it's just looking at what is your budget, and a lot of people don't have one. So that's one of the things that we do during our consultation is we give our clients a budget tool going, use this or don't, but if you want to make really informed decisions and set yourself up for success, this is a tool that will really help you. You need to know what money's coming in and where your money is going and where you can be flexible so that you can make really informed plans on how to handle this mortgage. Interest is necessary. It's a leverage tool that the vast majority of people are going to have to employ in order to equal home ownership. So let's not worry about what the cost of that is when we know we're going to need it. Let's worry how we can minimize that cost, understand that cost, and just make really good decisions around it. So we also bring in mortgage lenders. We have great partners in the mortgage industry from several different companies that can, A, help us shop rates, can B, look at first-time homebuyers. We love using the down payment assistance programs. If we have income restrictions, Ingham County Land Bank homes are great opportunities. There is a key to every home. There is a home for every person. It does take persistence. It does take some work. It takes management of expectations. It takes repetition. You have to try more than once in this market. But those people who really understand and get how important this is, that this is the number one way generational wealth is created, are willing to stick through that process with us, and we make sure that they're set up for success along the way.
Yes, absolutely. Chris, let's talk more about explaining things in perspective for people who really don't have any experience, right? I want to talk more specifically about making an offer towards a home, for an example. How do I make an offer for a home, and what should I include in that offer? You're my real estate agent. Let's talk. How are we doing this?
So let's first and foremost look at the house. So we're walking through the house. Let's get really informed. So myself, every agent on my team has been through international home inspection training and passed the exam. We're not certified or licensed home inspectors because that doesn't really exist. But it is important that we're not setting anyone up to waste money on an inspection for a home that shouldn't really get to that point for our client. So first, it's what are we really buying? Let's understand what it is that we're looking at. And then let's also look at what our comparables are. Let's examine the market. Let's look at our price per square foot. Let's look at our average sales price. Let's look at our medians. And then let's make some decisions on where do we think the market is going? How long are you going to be able to be in this home? What happens if life comes up and in half that amount of time you have to sell? Are you going to be able to do that or not? And that all guides where our top end is. And so that really looks at, irregardless of what they're asking for the home, it's more about what is going to set you up for success so that you're making a decision of, if somebody else were to pay $500 more than I offered for this home, I'm 100% okay with that because I can't control it anyway. And so that's really the framework that we use to guide our offers and to guide that communication process. They're really informed. They know what the home is. They know what to expect. They know what their expectations are going to be for immediate repairs, improvements. They understand what the costs are going to be for the cosmetics that they're going to want to do to make it home. They understand what their exit strategies are going to be because they've had to examine and been asked questions around what happens in life, what's your timeline, what are your goals, what is your 5-year, 10-year plan, where are you going to be, what happens when life comes up and that doesn't make it a reality, does this still allow us to exit? When we have that information, we have a lot more control and we have a lot more emotional empowerment to be okay if we lose. Losing is not always a loss, right? Sometimes the best thing you can do is lose something that you shouldn't have gotten anyway. So the final piece of that is faith, right? I don't care what you believe. Faith is a part of your life. And I'm not talking religion. I'm just saying you have to understand that there are going to be things that happen in your life beyond your control. So when it works, be thankful. And when it doesn't, be thankful, because it's still probably going to be what's best for you.
Correct. I love that, man. I like that you talk to them and put in perspective all the considerations, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said like, okay, you may claim this is your forever home, but let's just plan just in case you might have to leave in 4 years or something like that. Something that is definitely common also.
Yep. We're all human, and the only thing we can count on is change. So
Yeah, true.
We examine every variable that we have experience with that we can to empower you to make really good decisions. That's our goal. That's our focus point, is just how educated are you, and how can we improve upon that, and how can we trust that you trust us and that we trust you to make good decisions for both of us.
There it is. So here's another part of the process that a lot of people probably want to know some information about. This is the part of the process that the money's really involved in, the closing. What are some common closing costs associated with buying a home?
So most people don't understand, even people that have bought and sold homes before, that there are closing costs for both parties. When I'm working with buyers, the first thing they say is, will the seller cover my closing costs? And the first thing I ask of the seller is, will the buyer cover any of my closing costs? Well, everybody's going to cover their own closing costs. And
right.
In some markets, not as often today, we can negotiate for one party to assist another party using the equity of the home. Common closing costs that you're going to see on every transaction, starting with the seller side, are going to be real estate commissions and expenses are almost always going to be your highest expense, and that should come with some great guidance. We should also have our state transfer and Ingham, or county, not just Ingham, but any county transfer taxes. Those are set rates per $1,000 of value. You're going to have a property tax proration. People feel like they're getting taxed twice. They're not. They're different taxes, and yes, taxes are always involved, like we talked about before, necessary evil. So you've got to look at that. You're going to have an owner's title policy of insurance. In most cases, sometimes a bank won't provide one, but in most cases, you're going to have an owner's title policy of insurance. On the buyer side, you're going to have your loan origination fees if you're financing. You're going to have a closing fee, usually $400 to $500 if you're paying cash, or you're using a land contract. Haven't seen one of those used in a few years, but they're fun tools. And on the buyer side, you're going to have your portion of that annual tax proration, depending on when in the calendar year you purchased that home. So if you're purchasing that home after June 1, you're probably going to have a little bit of a debit or a bigger debit towards the end of the year for a seller, and vice versa for a buyer.
You just brought up something that I got to ask about, Chris. Land contracts.
Sure.
That's when the seller of a home is basically going directly to make a deal with the buyer of a home. Is that correct?
Sort of. You've got the principal understanding correct. So a land contract is also called a seller finance. And that is essentially where a buyer says, look, instead of utilizing a traditional mortgage, either because I choose to or because I can't, if you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are willing and able, I'd like for you to be the bank. So a great opportunity for a seller, especially in a higher interest rate environment, to maximize profit on the sale of a home, as long as they understand the risks and the steps necessary to regain that property in the case of a default. So pro to the seller is I can capitalize on interest as well as equity, so much higher profit return. Risk is I have a much more difficult proposition if someone defaults to remove them from my property, because I do have to go through a foreclosure process.
Correct.
Pro on the buyer side, I can avoid traditional financing, maybe save some finance costs, usually pay a slightly higher than market interest rate, but I can also maybe get in with a lower down payment, or if I've got cash, I can get into a higher down payment, and I can keep this property off of my credit in a way that allows me to grow an investment. I love seeing land contracts used on investment purchases whenever possible, because it allows you to buy, rehab, rehabilitate, rent, refinance, rinse, and repeat really, really quickly and effectively. It's the greatest scale method out there. Haven't been able to use that in a couple of years to scale here, because you're competing against owner occupants that are able to pay a much higher price because they're getting use and enjoyment of the home, not just equity.
Oh, wow. Okay. So with that being said, land contracts, it doesn't seem like it requires much activity between a real estate agent and whatnot. So where would, if any at all, where would a real estate agent fit in that scenario?
Well, how many sellers are understanding what the prime market is for rent for the rates on mortgages, how they can capitalize on rent retention, or on rate retention for interest rates, what the TRID limitations for a land contract are in terms of how long they can extend the term for that contract, how quickly they can require a balloon payment, how many land contracts they can sell in a year, how they can negotiate with price versus interest or interest versus price, how they can play with their amortization schedules if they want to balance that out over 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You can even do longer than that depending on what you want to do and what your goals are. You can have a really long amortization period and a really high interest rate, which means you're collecting more interest up front on that amortization schedule where the buyer's paying less principal down. And so therefore, when they refinance, they've got to pay more principal off. That's maximizing your return. Most sellers don't understand how to play with those variables and tools to create a better win-win scenario.
And that's where the realtor would step in.
That's where the realtor steps in. And on the flip side, it's the same for the buyer. The buyer's goal should be, how can I build my equity by paying down my principal as quickly as possible? And if I'm going to utilize a land contract, maybe I need to pay more on the purchase price in order to get a lower interest rate. It's just a different way to buy down my rate. And I'm still creating a win for the seller because they're getting that same profit. But by doing that, I'm accelerating my principal or equity growth.
Nice. Okay. All right. Glad you put that into perspective because I was definitely curious after you said that land contract.
Sure.
Okay.
A very common example would be a lot of people are getting familiar. They're doing this more and more with car loans. So the pick your payment from Carvana or from Ally Bank, where you just play with a mouse and move your cursor up and down to make my payment bigger or smaller. All they're doing is inversing those two variables of purchase price and interest.
Interest. Yep. Good point. Good perspective. Chris, it was something that I saw that you did on YouTube. When I say I honestly appreciate this because you really gave some great insight into the current market, Lansing market and real estate. You did a February monthly real estate market update on YouTube. Very informative. I encourage everybody to go check it out. But can you real quick, if you can, within 60 seconds, just basically explain the most recent market update for maybe the last month or whatever information you can give?
Absolutely. So for the last month, biggest piece of information is inventory is still really, really low. There's currently 390 active homes on the market. A balanced market would be closer to 1,400. So it's going to be a very strong seller-centric market. Interest rates are remaining stable, even though the Fed has increased mortgage rates with the last vote in March. I believe they're going to continue doing that. I do see rates staying stable in the mid sixes for most of the year, give or take 0.25%, because I do believe the mortgage industry has faith that our economic status is stable. So I believe that means, A, there is no such thing as timing the market, so don't try. Just go with what you can have, and the quickest path to home ownership is going to be the best path to growing your wealth and your financial well-being. And if you're a seller, don't worry about what's happening in the interest rate markets. There are plenty of buyers out there that still need to and want to buy your home. So if you want to maximize your value, the sooner you can take action, the more control you have over that scenario. The market is absolutely empowering both parties to take action.
Look at you. That's within 60 seconds. Okay, smart, very conscious. All right, I love it. Chris, man, listen, I appreciate it. You came by the closing table and you really, really dropped some knowledge. So thank you, sir, for taking time out of your day. Before we get out of here, if you have any last words and or want to tell the people how they can reach out to you, please do so now.
Best ways to reach out to me are my cell phone, 517-242-9251, or advantageInteam.com, contact us section. A lot of great information on the website as well. Would love to chat with you, even if it means you're not looking to buy a home today, if it means you just want to get informed on the market. Clearly, these are conversations I'm passionate about and love to share.
Yes, absolutely. And check out his YouTube channel too, man. He definitely has some great, very insightful
April's
videos.
Coming. We needed to do an end of Q1 update, so that's coming later this week.
Oh yeah, I'm subscribing to your channel and I'm gonna be right there looking, Chris. So thank you again.
Awesome.
Hey, you watching on YouTube right now, if you got this far in the video, please do us both a favor and hit that like button for us. Also hit the share button and subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platforms, please do the same. Give us a like, a 5-star rating, and also subscribe to our latest content. And I like to leave our audience with a question, Chris. Here's a question for our audience to think about. If you have owned and lived in a multi-family home and rented out the other vacancy, aka house hacked before, what were some things that you learned throughout the way? Share those experiences in the comments below. Other than that, we'll see you next time.